Welcome to Narratives and Beyond with Michael Adekombi as your host. Today I have on this platform a very powerful professional, as I will call him. I met him a few years ago, and he left a mark on my mind. Since then, and we've been in touch. Don't let me give you so much about him so that he can talk about himself. He's already here, and his name is Ayo Olatoye. You're welcome, Ayo.
Thanks, Michael. It's really, really cool to reconnect after so long, but it's also great to be on your podcast as well. Really proud of all the things that you are doing and the moves that you're making.
Thank you. Can you share a bit about your journey? What inspired your passion for education, particularly in the realm of corporate learning that you've been for a while?
All right. So maybe I'll go a little back just so that people kind of understand the context behind the story right now. So when I started my career, I started in banking. I worked for First Bank in Lagos, Nigeria. I worked for Access Bank, and I did that for a while. And it was amazing. I learned a lot about work ethic. I learned a lot about data, and that was really cool. And so there was a point in my life. This was in 2012. I took a look at the direction my career was heading. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to keep progressing where I was. Because again, I built up a skill set in electronic payments in the banking system, designing payment architectures, doing settlements and reconciliation, doing sales. I kind of did the whole gamut of that. But when I forecasted and I looked ahead 10, 20 years from where I was, it really wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I wasn't quite sure what it was that I wanted to do. But what I did know was I wanted to spend some time learning and looking at how I could translate some of the skills that I had already developed to another industry. So I took a year off to go do a full-time MBA program with Holt International Business School. And honestly, Michael, that was one of the most transformational years of my life. And so the program really focused on the core technical skills that you need for any kind of business, because it's an MBA, it's a general MBA degree, but I spent a lot of time focusing on personal development as well. And so I tell a lot of people, the person I was at the end of that program was very different from the person that matriculated at the beginning. Even my wife used to say, Ayo, you've changed. Like, Ayo, you're different, right? And so it was a whole lot of personal evolution. And as I was getting towards the end of the program, one of the things that I really decided was that I wanted to work in an industry that I personally found very, very fulfilling and very meaningful. And when I looked at my personal life, I had spent thousands of dollars. Like when I was in Nigeria, I spent tons of money on my own personal development, on self-education and self-learning. So I had taught myself so many things. And so I figured if I wanted a career that really had meaning and felt fulfilling, but also helped me grow, one of the best places I would want to be is in the space of education. Now, one thing I was clear about was that I didn't want to be a professor or a lecturer or a teacher. During my NYSC youth service, I had spent a year in Umunede, and I taught in a little school in a village. I taught literature and English to kids in SS1 to SS3. And it was great, but it was exhausting. At the end of the year, I was like, man, I salute all these teachers. This is not something I ever want to do
doing
again.
Great jobs.
Yeah. But like I said, I did love the industry. And so what I said was I wanted to be in the management part of education. So thinking about how we develop programs that help people accelerate skill acquisition, thinking about how to run an educational institution as a profitable venture as well. So there are a lot of these things that were kind of at the back of my mind. And so at the time, I then moved to work for EF Education First, which is, how you and I met. But at the time, EF was the largest privately owned education management company in the world. And so I thought to myself, if I want to learn about education, what better place to go to than the number one education company in the world, which is how I ended up in the education space.
Awesome. So what led to this trajectory, as you've said, was you were tired of the banking and all of that, and you felt that you were not really fulfilled in all of that. You enjoyed it while it lasts, right? Or while it lasted, but you felt that there is need for something new. And then going into the MBA, that changed the paradigm for you, and you didn't go back to banking. So if I ask a follow-up question on that, what would you say you actually took away from banking in Nigeria?
Oh man. Oh man. Like, and I want to qualify and this before I go in, because anybody who hears me say just because I wasn't fulfilled in banking is why I wanted to exit. Like banking is, especially in Nigeria, like you develop such phenomenal skill sets. The first thing, which a lot of people may not even, be consciously aware of, is the kind of work ethic that you develop. I worked for Access Bank, and Access Bank is legendary. Say you go work, but like I have such gratitude for the amount of time that I spent in Access Bank. Because when I moved to Dubai and when I was interviewing for the role that I would eventually have, I remember the hiring manager said, well, this role, it requires a lot of work. Sometimes you may even have to work on Saturdays. And I just laughed because I remember when Access Bank was going through the merger in 2000, and I think was it 10 or 11? For an entire year, I only did not go to work for like 6 days. And those 6 days include Saturdays and Sundays, right? So
wow,
like work ethic was something that's baked into you when you work in the banking industry in Nigeria. One of the other things that I found I learned from working in banking was, there are very few things that intimidate you when it comes to targets and goals and things that you have to achieve. Like looking at Access Bank, the amount of things we were able to achieve as a team, and I led a team of about 23 people at the time. It's ridiculous. Like you would get a mandate and say, look, you guys need to do XYZ by XYZ period. And you would look at that and you would struggle to be able to fathom how you would achieve that. But then you would, if you'd had no choice but to achieve it, you would marvel at the kind of resourcefulness and the sense of agency you have in making things happen. So I learned that. The other thing I learned as well was just data. I spent a lot of time in the reconciliation team, and so it taught me to handle like massive amounts of data. Got really good with Excel. Got really good at looking at patterns and finding patterns in like massive dumps of data. And one that I joked about. So when I was in my MBA program, one of my classmates, he's British. He was saying, hey, look, Ayo, like you do really well with, presentations under pressure when we have to do these team projects and we have to present like on the fly. And I told him, I said, look, man, when I worked for Access Bank, we used to have these MPRs, monthly performance reviews. And God help you if you show up and you present rubbish. Like they will shred you. Like people have lost jobs in these kind of situations. So you have to learn to think on your feet, but you also have to prepare as best as you can ahead of time. So to kind of summarize your question, like I learned a ton of skills in banking that were immediately transferable to the roles that I had afterwards.
Awesome. So what you're telling a young professional is while you are in a job, ensure you learn as much as possible. Skill up, reskill, and reskill, because those skills can always be transferable to any other job that you're going to take up later in life. Very strong. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if I can just add one thing onto what you just said, because again, you just framed that as what people, especially young people, can take away.
Yeah.
Like one of the big things that I really believe is that you never want to play victim, right? Like you need to believe in a sense of agency that you have. And so whilst I was at the bank, there were a lot of people, the moment they announce and say, oh, you guys have to do X, they'll be like, they don't come again. Like how do we want to do this? And instead of looking into their hearts to pull out that resourcefulness and that sense of agency to figure it out, they play the victim and they rob themselves of their power. And those are the people at the end of the day that don't make it, or, end up just resigning because they say there's too much pressure and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, there is pressure, but I truly believe that if you don't play the victim in whatever role you are, and you're just determined and you say, look, as long as I'm here, as long as I'm drawing a salary from this organization, I will give my 120% effort to make sure I can achieve what it is that they ask us to do.
Awesome. Thank you. That's wisdom. I'm sure someone is learning from that already. Can you share the relationship you can see between your passion for the management side of education, so to say, and your role as regional director of Hort International Business School?
So if you take a big macro look at education, setting up a really, really good school is a significant investment. You want to make sure that the people coming in have a phenomenal experience, a great learning experience. You want to make sure that when they graduate, they get the ROI on their investment in your school by getting good jobs, getting great opportunities. And you also want to make sure as an institution, you are attracting the right caliber of students so that you can continue to generate revenue as a school. So all of these pieces together fit into the role that I do. My role, I have an input in what is the market demanding? What do they want right now in terms of the skilled graduates that they're hiring? I'm able to take that information and feed it back to the smart people that are sitting down to design programs. I'll give you an example. At Halt, we don't write exams at Halt because it's not relevant anymore. Like if what you want is somebody that's going to graduate and come into your company and begin to add value, you can say, oh, we don't have customers. He tells you this is what you're going to do. And he begins to action and execute on that. And in a few weeks, you have people, paying to come into your organization, right? So you want to be able to design that kind of experience. And I love that because it makes me very passionate and confident about the school that I represent because I have an input in the experience that's designed for students that helps them excel, right? So that's really the link. Like my passion for education is seeing how education can transform people through skills that have utility. And my role at Halt is being part of that process, attracting the right people, making sure that the programs are designed in a way that give them the outcome that they want, looking at the tail end of things and having, my input in making sure these people are getting the kind of roles and jobs and opportunities that make that investment worth it for them. And also being able to articulate the value of what they get at Halt to the general community.
Awesome. So what you're saying in essence is that education is not just about getting the certificate. It's about developing the necessary skills that will solve real life problems in the corporate world.
Yes, 100%. Because, the old model of education, it was just about knowledge and information. Oh, we teach you this, you go and regurgitate it. And then you get a certificate. But if you look at like ChatGPT and all of these things, now knowledge it's now a commodity. Anybody can sit down and call up information at the drop of a hat. But what really matters and what people pay for is skills. And let me give you a bit of an analogy to kind of drive that point home. If somebody comes into your organization, you as a hiring manager, you have a need. You as a CEO or founder, you have a need. Maybe your need is, we want to increase revenue, so we need to get more customers. And so if you hire somebody that graduates from a degree in marketing from a business school, and the person comes and says, oh, Michael, the 5 Ps of marketing are, and he starts regurgitating that information, it doesn't add any value. But if somebody comes and says, oh, Michael, look, I've looked at this. Your positioning in the market is kind of like the middle tier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some advert collateral. I'm going to open the ads manager. I'm going to run campaigns. When these people click on the campaigns, they're going to come into this CRM. This person sitting here is going to call them. Our conversion rate typically for this kind of thing should be maybe like 25, 30%. So we should be able to get X, Y, Z. And not only does he say it, the next day he sits down and he begins to do it. And so that's really the difference between the old model of education where people will graduate with just information. They will come into your company. You now have to teach them all over again versus what's happening now where people are graduating and they're coming into your organization and they are adding skills immediately.
And they're prepared.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how do you design programs that not only educate, but also drive real business impacts that bring solution to the graduates, into the corporate world? How do you design that?
I love this question so much. And let me first tell you why I love the question, then I'll tell you, how we design it. There are a lot of schools that say, oh, we're big on practical learning. And everybody's saying that because it sounds like the right thing to say. But if you ask them, how do you do it? Then, they can't defend it. Let me tell you how we do it at Halt. So when we design the program, it's designed in modules. So if you take the MBA program, for example, it's designed in 5 modules, right? In your first module, you'll have 3 courses there. So let's say, for example, because it kind of changes and moves around, but let's say, for example, course 1 is on marketing, right? Let's say the second course is on financial modeling. Let's say the third course is on brand and brand strategy, right?
Yeah.
After we teach you these 3 courses, before we teach you anything else, we do what we call practical business case challenges. So we take the classroom, let's say it's a classroom of 30 or 40 people. We break them into groups of 5. So they become like a mini company or a team on their own. They now have a business case. For example, we might say, go and create a business. So you have to think of the name. You decide on which segment of the market you're going after. You create, for example, maybe adverts. So you open up the ads manager on Facebook or on Google, and you design campaigns, and then you actually test and run, and you verify your hypothesis. And so what's happened is all those things that we've taught you, we're forcing you to use them in a practical, real case scenario. And as you move ahead in the program, we have so many companies that we partner with, the Facebooks, like all of these companies. And what they do is when we do business case challenges, they send senior executives from the company to present problems they're trying to solve in their companies. And then we then assign a team of 5 people in each, teams of 5. Everybody in the class is part of a team. We assign them to different companies. And so they go in as consultants to work with these companies to use everything they've learned to try to solve the problems that they have. And so these people are, they're presenting solutions to high-level executives. And I'll give you a very simple example. So if you know the company Daimler that, owns Mercedes and all these other brands, they have something that they're executing right now called their innovation roadmap for 2030. They're thinking about, what will the cars of the future look like? Like, what are the things that we should be building for or towards? That innovation roadmap was developed by a set of HALT students who were giving this challenge.
Oh, wow.
They went and they looked at, what are the things that are going to happen? What do we need to put into cars? And then they presented this. Daimler loved it. They implemented it into their innovation roadmap. So again, like how we drive skill acquisition, when we teach them in class, we make them use practical business challenges to implement the things that we've taught them. Then we put them in front of real executives and real companies, presenting the solutions, helping them sometimes to implement part of it. So when they graduate from the program, they're not graduating with just theoretical knowledge. They are graduating with hard skills that translate to value and utility for their companies.
Wow. Okay, this is awesome, because I think a lot of schools are still quite traditional in their approach to learning, especially from our climate in Africa.
Yes.
Okay. What would you say are the greatest skill gaps that you have seen in the workplace, and how do you think that generally educational institutions like yours, like HALT, can bring solutions to closing that gap?
All right. So, the funny thing is this, right? Like the LinkedIn last year, they published, so they scraped through hundreds of millions of job postings, like hundreds of millions of job postings. And they looked at what are the most in-demand skills that employers are hiring for. So if they scan through the job posting itself, they disregard the role, but they look at the competencies and the skills that are, that are highly sought after. One of them is communication. And it's not just communication in terms of your ability to sound fancy. It is your ability to articulate a vision or an outcome you want to achieve in a manner that gets the buy-in of all the stakeholders, high and low, right? And so it's a huge part of what it takes to lead in an organization. Like you can have all the best skills in the world, but until you're able to really articulate and galvanize people into action using your words, like you can't get very far. And if you look at all the greats, like if you look at all the Steve Jobs, all the Peter Druckers, all of these guys, many of them had to learn that skill set, but it was their ability to communicate the direction the organization needs to move into that really helped them, move ahead, right? So that's definitely one skill that you need to have. Another one is called, it's actually learning, the ability to self-educate. And, one of the things that we really force people to do at HALT, like I said, we don't do exams. We force them to engage critical thinking skills. I think that really makes the big difference between somebody that's in a role and they say, they need to come and teach me what to do here, versus somebody who's in a role and he's been given a mandate and he says, okay, let me go figure out how to make this happen. Right. So I would say, if again, there are a ton of skills that people learn, because the further down you go, you get more specialized. You can say, okay, look, if they're learning marketing, then we want to really teach them consumer psychology. We want to teach them, how to self-educate on tools. But if I wanted to really bucket skills, it would be communication. It would be the ability to learn, teaching them how to learn. And then the third one would just be ability to really work in teams, to understand how to navigate team dynamics in very culturally diverse
to be a team player.
To be a team player. But more than that, even more than that. So I'll give you an example. One of the reasons why we force our cohorts into teams of 5 is because we're trying to simulate what it's going to be like to work in an organization. So it's important to be a team player for sure, but you also need to learn even some individual leadership skills there. You're going to have team members that they're not pulling their weight. They're not doing the work. Like, how do you navigate that tension between calling them out, but also persuading them to add their weight to what needs to happen in the team, right? How do you divide work, split it, and everybody comes back together? How do you manage large scale projects? So there are a lot of learnings that fall within that. But if I wanted to sort of encapsulate the majority of what we're trying to let people come out with, it's just, they would need to communicate really, really well. They need to learn how to learn, because the rate of change is just so rapid.
They need to learn how to learn.
They learn how to learn. Like, how do you educate yourself in a particular field? We throw you in a new space. We don't tell you too much about it. But you have to figure out how to learn, right? And then how do you just navigate team dynamics and thrive in team environments?
That's strong. Learn how to learn. Oh, wow. That's deep, really. Learn how to learn. Okay, thank you. The current business climate is so fast paced that of course, with the advent of AI, robotics, and all of that, how can young professionals or professionals generally future-proof leadership?
Amazing. So that's a really good question. So how can young professionals future-proof leadership? So I guess one of the things, I'm part of a panel at the AIMCOM conference next week, and so we had to catch up with some of the panel members, and one of the panelists, Nancy Gleason, she's a professor at NYU Abu Dhabi. She said something that was pretty remarkable. She said, everybody is freaking out about ChatGPT now, but we're going to have things like ChatGPT happening every year. It will happen. You say, oh my God, it's going to keep happening at a very, very rapid pace. And so for people who are thinking about, in terms of leadership, like, how do I ensure that my skill sets remain relevant? I think it really boils down to not just learning the tools themselves, but understanding what tools can and should help you achieve. And so, for example, to kind of make this a bit more practical, if you are in a role and you know that the importance of being a great leader is X, you need to just decide and define, in terms of leadership, what are the main competencies that I want to demonstrate and exhibit? And then you now start backtracking and thinking about what are the tools that would help me develop and build those, but also to communicate those to the person, to the general public. And I'll give you one angle that I think is really important for people who they want to be able to remain relevant as they grow into leadership. And it's the topic of personal branding, right? Like, as you're learning things and you are refining and honing your skills in a particular direction, you need to be able to showcase that to a larger community overall. And so, for example, to a young professional who's getting into an organization, and they say, okay, look, my goal is to become a manager at XYZ in 5 years. What are the things that how are you adding value to the organization? What are the things that you're learning? How are you sharing the things that you're learning so that people understand and you start making yourself a thought leader or the go-to guy in this particular space? All right. So to just summarize it, stay abreast of the things that are happening, keep learning, the things that you're learning, keep sharing them.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Leadership has been major part of your career, your career growth, as it were. I would like to ask, what would be your own definition of leadership or effective leadership? Because someone can be a leader and not be effective. What is your definition of effective leadership? And if we bring it to the academic world, for instance, what would be your definition of effective leadership in in the academic world? I don't know whether that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll answer the question from behind. So
Okay.
effective leadership in the academic world is the same as
Yeah.
effective leadership anywhere in any industry, right?
Awesome.
And if you
Awesome.
think about effective leadership, there are two polarities, and there's this tension between both that actually shouldn't be there. So as a leader, you have a mandate from the organization to achieve certain outcomes. So this is the organization's vision. This is where we want to see ourselves. You're leading a team of people and you need to work with them in order to achieve that outcome. Now, on the one hand, you have some people who, as leaders, they see the people they're leading as tools to drive that outcome, which is wrong. It's very one-sided. Because as a leader, you have a commitment to the growth and development of the team members that you manage. And so in order to effectively lead, you need to make sure that the people that you're managing are growing, they're thriving in the roles that they have. And the growth and the thriving that's happening is propelling the organization towards the outcomes and the goals that the organization also has. So it needs to be very aligned. Like, for example, if you as a leader find that somebody is miserable in the role that they're doing, and they have no interest in being there, like whatsoever, it's very hard to change that person into someone who's going to thrive within that organization. But it's your job actually to help people find meaning or to help them see a future in the organization that they're working with, to make sure that the skills that they have are harnessed, that they're challenged and that they're stimulated. And you're doing that within the framework and the guidelines of what you have scope of as a leader in the organization. So to summarize, effective leadership is a leader who is moving his team or his organization in the direction of the vision of the company, and doing that by growing his team members. So everybody is growing and, and moving forward and feeling fulfilled. They all see their place in this. Because what you oftentimes have, and I think you see this in a lot of high pressure environments, is where people feel they're just a cog in the wheel that are being used to satisfy shareholders and the management. And that's always going to be a very bad system. And so as a manager, one of the things that you need to spend a lot of time doing is speaking to your team, understanding what you can do to help them, in the contribution that they're playing, because everybody wants a sense of meaning. If you say, hey guys, look, this is what you did last week, and this is what this has done for the organization, everybody kind of loves that feeling. So yeah, ultimately that's it. If you look at it strategically, tactically, there's so many other things that you need to do to make that happen. Like if you're articulating the vision of the team, you're boiling that down to KPIs, you're creating systems where people are held accountable to those KPIs. You're rewarding them, but there's also a sense of accountability that makes them constantly strive to go above and beyond to deliver that. So again, I've said a lot of things, but effective leadership is driving the team towards the organization's goals and making sure the people within your management scope are growing in their careers.
So I agree with you, because what you have said in my mind is that we need to, as a leader, if you want to be an effective leader, you need to know how to align the people you are leading to the goals of the organization, because there must always be an alignment between what the people are doing and what the organization is expecting them to do. There must be an alignment, and they have to keep growing as well, so that they can thrive. Okay, thank you so much. This will be the end of this session with Ayolatoye. We'll be right back, after this break. Thank you.